This broadcast will start in 30 seconds. This broadcast will start in 15 seconds. This broadcast will start in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Voice of Stockton. For more information on The Voice of Stockton, go to thevoiceofstockton.org.
The views and opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of KXVS, The Voice of Stockton, or its parents, affiliates, management, and staff.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another amazing episode of The Phone Booth here on KXVS, The Voice of San Joaquin. My name is Ed Heitman, and joining me in the studio today is my good friend and co-host, Brian Rodriguez. How you doing today, man?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Good to hear, good to hear. Now, in case some of you out there are first-time listeners of the show, The Phone Booth is completely dedicated to the world of pop culture. Anything from movies to video games to TV shows to comic books, you name it, and we do our very best to cover it. Now, today is a bit of an interesting story. I just gotta say, Brian, video game companies do not have it pretty well starting off in the new year, it seems.
Well, you know, not having it pretty well is relative.
Yeah,
They still make billions of dollars.
yeah, I guess most companies can't complain, can they?
No.
But we're gonna be talking about two video game companies in particular, Activision and Bungie. But before we tackle right into our discussion pieces, it is time for us to enter our weekly recap, where we talk about some of the little tidbits of news that have passed by within the week. And I'm willing to start off. Now, co-founder and former president of Blizzard Entertainment, Mike Morhaime, announced that he will be leaving Blizzard in April. Morhaime, one of the co-founders of Blizzard, stepped down as president last October, but stayed on as a strategic advisor. This news comes only a few weeks after Blizzard lost their CFO, Amrita Ahuja, and a few months after reports started surfacing that Activision is starting to exert more control over the company. I find it interesting that it's not just a particular employee that left, it was a co-founder.
Yeah, co-founder, former president. And you'll notice he stepped down as president only about a month before the entire BlizzCon fiasco and the reports starting to surface that Activision's taking more control. So it seems very much like he may be leaving in response to these things.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for sure. I mean, I can't help but wonder what do you think some of the what might come of this? What would happen with Blizzard after this?
Well, it's certainly not going to help things on the Activision front. Losing one of the people that founded the company, that founded its culture, is not going to be great for, staving off a sort of cultural takeover by Activision. I think that this is a sign that I don't like to go all doom and gloom. I don't like to say, oh, then the sky is falling. But I think this is a good sign that Blizzard will change and bend to Activision's will. I think that now that a founder of the company is leaving, I don't think there's really much hope for them to maintain the same Blizzard culture, Blizzard feeling. It's sort of hard to describe. It's all these little things: the quality, the attitude of the developer, the way they publish their games. It's all these little things that I think it's just going to sort of feel different.
Yeah. Well, anyways, Brian, I'll let you take the next little news bit here.
So speaking of Activision, which is a theme for this episode, Bungie recently announced they are severing ties with Activision and that Bungie will retain the rights to their popular sci-fi shooter Destiny. This is possibly due to tension between Activision and Bungie that has bubbled up in various forms. Most recently, Activision saying that Destiny 2 Forsaken did not live up to its sales expectations, even though it was the best-selling game on console in its month of release.
Man.
Yeah, this one we actually have a discussion piece on later, so we're gonna, keep it light. But this is actually really big because Bungie had a 10-year contract that they're only 8 years into with Activision. This is sort of unprecedented in the industry and might lead to more things like this in the future. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's just interesting knowing that the tension had led all the way up to this. Because, I mean, we were all pretty surprised when Activision made the claim that Destiny 2 Forsaken wasn't really performing well. From what I heard, Forsaken was one of the really, really good parts of Destiny 2.
Yeah, and it sold... It was, again, the best-selling game on consoles in September, which is not the most competitive month, but had a few good releases in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it also didn't sell nearly as well as Destiny 2 at launch did. A, because it's an expansion, they never sell as well as the base title. And B, because of missteps with the development of Destiny 2 that burned a lot of fans and made a lot of people not want to return. Along with a shift to a more hardcore player focus, which, again, drives away the more casual player that Destiny 2 was sort of catering to in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'd like to see what happens... how this is going to affect the game in itself and everything, but we'll get to that in a bit. Brian's got his own little piece to discuss that. But on to the next little bit of news. Gambit, X-Force, and Doctor Doom's movies may all be canceled. According to Daniel Rickman, a writer for Super Bro Movies, all 3 movies are victims of the Disney-Fox merger. He did say that there's a chance X-Force could be made, but only if it starts filming in the next 2 months, which is unlikely.
Yeah.
Now, if you guys are unfamiliar with this, Disney's basically been trying to make a deal. Well, actually, they have made a deal, and it's supposed to be done real soon, where they'll be merging with 20th Century Fox, some of its properties.
Yes.
Yes.
Most significantly, the X-Men and Fantastic Four franchises will be going back to Disney and Marvel Entertainment.
Yeah, and there's some excitement about that, with the fact that there's a good possibility that the X-Men might be included within the Avengers universe, as well as the Fantastic Four. But then there are scenarios like this, where there are movies that were already going to be worked on by 20th Century Fox that are now getting canned because of this merger. But now, for X-Force and Doctor Doom, I have to confess I didn't really know too much about these movies being in development. I knew about Gambit because it had a long-standing reputation of constantly being announced that they're going to work on it, and then almost immediately saying, oh, we're not working on it anymore, but we might do it later on. Just hang in there, guys. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a shame to hear that these movies are going to get canned. Because I was really looking forward to the Gambit movie, and the X-Force, that sounds really good.
Yeah, it's been in development for a while, but it was really set up in actually Deadpool 2. It was supposed to be a spinoff. Ryan Reynolds was supposed to reprise the role as Deadpool in X-Force. Cable was supposed to come back. They're essentially the more morally gray version of the X-Men. They'll do things like assassinate people or things like that.
Yeah, and that would have been really, really cool. Especially a Doctor Doom movie, because I feel all the Fantastic Four movies that have been out didn't really do justice for Doctor Doom's character compared to his actual persona in the comic books.
Doctor Doom is a really fantastic villain with a lot of depth, and really he's actually terrifying at times. And I think the original Fantastic Four movies did an okay job with him. They stuck closer to the comic book, though not completely. And then, well, Van Forstic just sort of... Let's not talk about that movie.
Yeah, I won't go into the dumpster fire that is Van Forstic, but I was really hoping that... I kind of wish they would do the Doctor Doom movie, because while the original Fantastic Four movies that were there were pretty good, and Doctor Doom was still an interesting villain in those movies, he just didn't really have the right character, I guess. He didn't really seem as like this sophisticated, highly intelligent person. He was just more of this really rich guy who ended up becoming a bad guy and just kind of rolled with it.
Yeah.
You know? But anyways, on to the next little bit of news.
MIB 23 has been canceled. Now, for those of you that don't know what that means, it was revealed back in 2014 during the Sony Pictures hack, where a bunch of executive emails were released, that they were working on a crossover between the Men in Black franchise and the 21 Jump Street franchise. The movie was supposed to be a direct sequel to 22 Jump Street, the 23 part of that, and was supposed to center on the characters from the first 2 movies becoming a part of the Men in Black. Now, a lot of people, me included, thought this was a really, really dumb and desperate idea for a movie.
Yeah, well... I actually thought it would have been really cool. I mean, come on. The idea of Men in Black and the 21 Jump Street guys teaming up Especially because of the fact that around the end of 22 Jump Street, because I watched it when it was on FXX, and during the end credits, they basically made fun of the fact that Jump Street can make constant movies, 22, 24, 68 Jump Street.
Yeah, wasn't there like a 28 Jump Street in space?
There was a Jump Street Forever kind of thing, so the idea of them partnering up with Men in Black, it sounds ridiculous, but it doesn't sound impossible.
No, and it definitely wasn't impossible because despite some pretty widespread ridicule for the idea when it was leaked, they actually did try to develop the movie for the next few years, going so far as to hire a director and hiring a screenwriter in December of 2016. Now, that announcement of hiring the screenwriter was the last time we actually heard anything from the movie until about a week ago when it was announced that the movie had been canceled.
It's a shame.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah.
I get the feeling that we'll eventually get a 23 Jump Street or whatever it is, and we're getting Men in Black International, so we are getting sequels.
Yeah.
And I remember it was about the time that MIB 23 leaked, that it was also said that the Ghostbusters was supposed to be a part of the shared universe of the three franchises.
Oh, wow.
And then the new Ghostbusters bombed for so many reasons that we're not going to get into right now.
Yeah, it'd be too long of an episode, and we don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers.
Yeah, anyway, it bombed, and then Men in Black 3 bombed a few years earlier, and then 22 Jump Street did okay, I think.
It was alright.
Didn't really live up to the huge expectations, but it did alright. I haven't seen any of them, but I've heard they're pretty good.
Yeah, 22 Jump Street wasn't necessarily as good as 21 Jump Street, but they did good with the material that they had, and they pulled off the movie fair enough.
Yeah.
It's a shame to hear that this hilarious idea almost was a reality, then it got canceled. Let's just hope that at some point in the future it might come back. Who knows?
Who knows?
On to the next little bit of news. Choose Co., the company that is known for creating the Choose Your Own Adventure book series, is suing Netflix over an episode of Black Mirror titled Bandersnatch. Now, Bandersnatch is an interactive episode, because Netflix has been trying to do more interactive stuff lately. And the episode in itself revolves around a book that the author in this episode titled Bandersnatch, the same as the title of the episode. Anyways, he claims that this is a choose your own adventure game, and it ends up being very dark, very graphic, people fighting to the death, drug use, all that stuff. And Choose Co. is upset about this because apparently back in 2016, Netflix was trying to get the license for the whole Choose Your Own Adventure title, basically.
Remember that?
Yeah, they were even trying to do children's programs that were like Choose Your Own Adventure and stuff. But apparently Choose Co. had sent them cease and desist letters numerous times regarding this whole thing. So now they claim that not only does this imply that Bandersnatch is affiliated with the whole Choose Your Own Adventure brand as a whole, but that it's so dark that it forever tarnished their reputation with their books and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this isn't the first time, of course, that Netflix has been sued. In fact, a while back, we talked about how they're being sued by the Satanic Temple for their use of the statue of Baphomet in the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. But this one's a lot more interesting because this is also due to supposed rights. They ripped off something, basically.
Yeah, I believe there was a Choose Your Own Adventure book actually called Bandersnatch at one point, which is also sort of a crux of the lawsuit, which, if I'm not just completely misremembering something, that could prove fatal for Netflix, because the very concept of a Choose Your Own Adventure interactive medium isn't new. I mean, it's what Telltale games are. It's what, the point-and-click adventure series with, the dynamic choices that affect the story. It's essentially a video game Choose Your Own Adventure. So if that was just it, then Choose Co. wouldn't really have a leg to stand on with Bandersnatch. But, the possible reference to Choose Your Own Adventure in the title, the actual book being named after it, again, if that is actually a thing, means that Choose Co. might actually have a leg to stand on here, which will be interesting.
Yeah, and then there's also the fact that they stated that Netflix has been trying to use the whole Choose Your Own Adventure thing for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
So this isn't like this whole argument came out of nowhere. It's just been very mild arguments, I guess, leading up to now, where they're absolutely furious because the episode might be tarnishing their reputation as a book company.
Which, I mean, I Choose Your Own Adventures were fun as kids. I mean, I don't know how much of their reputation can be tarnished, because really they are aimed at a much younger audience than Bandersnatch.
Yeah, honestly, I don't really think too many people would see this episode of of Black Mirror and go, wow, now I really want to go get some Choose Your Own Adventure books.
It's like how you play Telltale's The Walking Dead, you don't exactly think, oh, it's a zombie Choose Your Own Adventure. That's not what comes to your mind. You think, okay, if you really think about it, you see some similarities to Choose Your Own Adventure, but that's mainly just because of the way you interact with the
format,
media.
Basically. Yeah, that's interesting. Anyways, Brian, I'll let you take this next little bit of news.
A developer room has been found in Fallout 76. Now, for those of you that don't know, developer rooms, which are really famous in Bethesda games, are rooms developers make. They typically have every item in the game, and they use it for testing purposes, testing weapons, testing armor, They typically have one or infinite of every resource in the game. And they're typically inaccessible in these games except through console commands, which in single-player Bethesda titles you could do. You could type in a command, or if you were on a console nowadays, you could load up a mod that would let you access the developer rooms. You could get a bunch of resources, a bunch of high-level gear if you wanted. It's a thing. However, in Fallout 76, it's an online multiplayer game with PvP elements, so it's actually something of a problem to have this room here. Now, the room, apparently, has the only human NPC in the game, which is significant because, again, it's the only one in the game because of Fallout 76's cockamamie idea of, oh, no NPCs, just players, except for all these robot NPCs, but they don't count because they're not people, which, after the entire Fallout 4 argument over whether synths are people or robots is kind of... I hadn't thought about that. No time for it right now.
Yeah, no time.
It also contained event items, pre-order exclusive items, or specific version of the game exclusive items that you could access without those, or even unannounced content. Now, Bethesda is actually apparently responding to this by sending people that have accessed the room emails asking how they got into the room and suspending their account until they answer. Now, this is, on the one hand, it seems like this is kind of Bethesda's fault for even leaving this in the game at launch accessible. On the other hand, I kind of agree with their tactics because this is a completely game-breaking thing. I don't really care about people getting access to the pre-order stuff. I kind of hate that practice, so more power to the people that break it. Oh, yeah. But the game-breaking stuff like, an infinite amount of mini-nukes, that's, that's not great.
Yeah, and... I can't help but like the little fact that they're trying to ask people how they got to this room and then suspending their account. Because me and Brian were talking about this, and this is exactly like the whole developer island thing with the classic World of Warcraft.
Yep.
There used to be like this little island, and it was like really difficult to get to this location, but if you would get there, it was like a single shack. There was like a lot of chairs set up, a lot of like floor pads, and I guess this was a place that developers would go to meet. And if you happened to get to here, you would not be able to get back to the World of Warcraft. I wasn't sure people found a way, but they would have to talk to the developer and let them know they were stuck there, get teleported back into the World of Warcraft, and then their account would be banned because they basically trespassed onto forbidden territory. And I think it's funny that stuff like this is still happening, and honestly, I'm not really too surprised that it happened with 76, considering how much of a broken game it is.
Yeah, it's apparently people began to access this room after a patch that tried to fix a weapon duplication bug, and this is arguably so much worse than people being able to duplicate items or weapons, and that they can just get an infinite amount now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also, we would just like to mention that the patch made bobby pins lighter now.
Yeah, bobby pins used to be ridiculously heavy in 76, to the point where 60 of them equaled the weight of a mini nuke, which is essentially a football made of metal.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but it's hilarious at the same time.
Oh, Fallout 76.
Fallout 76.
I both hope you never change and desperately hope you change for the better at the same time.
Well, that about does it for the weekly recap, ladies and gentlemen. And now it is time for us to enter our next little segment, Trailer Talk. And in this segment, Brian and I like to talk about some of the trailers that have dropped within the week and give a little bit of our opinion on what we thought of these movies and the respected trailers. So let's jump right in. the first trailer is for a movie called Polar. It's a U.S. release date is in 2019, but a specific month is yet to be announced. Starring Mads Mikkelsen, Catherine Winnick, Vanessa Hudgens, and others. Synopsis is that a master assassin comes out of retirement to contend with a group of young hitmen, and it's directed by Jonas Ackerlund. Now, I'm definitely interested in this movie, one, because of the fact that it's based off of a graphic novel. And usually when movies or TV shows are based off of a graphic novel, you know that they're going to be interesting. I definitely enjoyed Atomic Blonde, which was based off of a graphic novel. I'm very interested in watching the sci-fi series Deadly Class, which is based off of a series of graphic novels as well. I also enjoyed the sci-fi series Happy, which was also based off of a graphic novel of the same title. So it definitely has promises of it being very action-packed, as I am a guy who enjoys very good action scenes. But the story premise to it also sounds very interesting. This hitman basically retires, and he's out in this remote little town like hitmen usually do when they retire. And he's being hunted down by these assassins. And at one point you hear some dialogue saying that, like, if a hitman who retired ended up being killed under a certain period of time, the $8 million that goes to that assassin gets brought back to the organization that hired them. So it seems these people are trying to kill him early so that way they don't have to pay him. And he decides to go on a revenge streak to get back at them for trying to kill him. And overall, it looks pretty interesting in my opinion.
Yeah, I like the look of it. And I pointed this out earlier, it has a very similar sort of setup to John Wick. And that's this, hitman coming out of retirement to go and seek revenge against an agency that wronged him. It's not, it's not a carbon copy. It couldn't be called a ripoff of John Wick. It has a lot of different elements. But I think it's interesting that we're getting another action movie with a similar setup. But this one is much more colorful, I want to say. Mm-hmm. It has a lot more color to it, and it has a bit more of a cartoony feel to it. Like there's one instance where he's ambushing a bunch of people with turret drones that are hooked up to lasers in his gloves so he can point his fingers at people and shoot them. And that is something you would not see in John Wick, but I still love it.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. It has that same tone. I mean, it has the same premise that John Wick has, that's true. The whole hitman revenge arc and everything, but
that's hardly a new premise.
Yeah, definitely. And I can't help but enjoy it. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the fight scenes that come into play, because this guy's clearly going to come up with creative methods of dealing with these people, and that's always fun to watch, I suppose. Mm-hmm. So we'll definitely keep you guys informed on any other trailers that drop, or if a release date is officially announced for the month specifically. Now, the next trailer we're going to be talking about is the first trailer for Little. Its U.S. release date is to be announced, so there's no official release date as of yet. Starring Issa Rae, Regina Hall, and Marseille Martin, and others. Synopsis is that a woman receives the chance to relive the life of her younger self at a point in her life when the pressures of adulthood become too much for her to bear, and it's directed by Tina Gordon Chisholm. Now, one thing that is immediately evident when you watch this trailer is that it's basically a mirrored version of the movie Big.
It's Big in reverse.
Yeah.
I mean, even the title Little sort of points to the fact that Big had to be an inspiration for this.
Yeah, especially because of the fact that their plots are very, very similar. A boy wishes to be big, and he wakes up the next morning an adult. A child wishes for this lady to be her age, and then she wakes up the next morning as a little girl. And as far as humor goes, if you ever watched Big, you can expect the kind of humor you would see in Little. Whereas with Big, you got to see a grown-up act like a little kid. In Little, you get to see a little girl act like a grown woman. And there are some very hilarious scenes so far in just the trailer alone. This looks hilarious. Mm-hmm. I can't wait to watch this movie when it comes out.
Yep.
But yeah, definitely check out the trailer. If you're a fan of comedies and if you enjoyed the movie Big, I'm pretty sure that you would enjoy the premise of this movie.
Yeah, it's Big in reverse, sort of meets The Devil Wears Prada. The main character is sort of Meryl Streep's character from The Devil Wears Prada until she gets Freaky Friday'd into a reverse Big.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's a weird sentence, but it's a pretty good description, I think.
Yeah, it's fairly accurate. Not much really needs to be described aside from that to really understand. Now, the next trailer is the first trailer for Hotel Mumbai. Its U.S. release date is March 22nd, 2019. starring Armie Hammer, Nazanin Bonladi, Jason Isaacs, and others. Synopsis is that it's the true story of the Taj Hotel terrorist attack in Mumbai. Hotel staff risk their lives to keep everyone safe as people make unthinkable sacrifices to protect themselves and their families, and it's directed by Anthony Maris. Now, one thing I have to say about this movie is it does a really good job at pulling off a suspenseful story that's based on true events. Any event that you see happening within the trailer, once things start to escalate, you can't help but feel this feeling of like suspense and fear. Like you're afraid of what's going to happen next, but you're also like really confused. You're not sure what's going to happen next. Mm-hmm. You know, but all in all, this looks like a really good movie.
Yeah, it's let's see, it's Dev Patel, Nazim Bunyadi, Jason Isaacs, and for the first time, I'm actually interested in seeing something Armie Hammer's in. He's never really been an actor that interested me until now.
Yeah, it definitely looks interesting. Like I said, very suspenseful. And it's interesting because usually I have to confess, I'm not usually interested in movies that are like based on true stories and events and stuff. Because sometimes it kind of feels like each movie is too identical to the other because they're trying their best to stick to true events. And while they are sticking very close to true events, they're really doing their best to show the suspense and fear that people within the hotel feel during this incident. And that's something that I wish more stories based on true events would actually pull off.
It'll be interesting to see how accurate to the true events they are, because these movies, they inevitably have to make changes for, you know, filmmaking purposes. They have to change the timing of events. They have to change what certain actors or characters or people do in this situation, because the original way it happened doesn't quite work for film, but if they change it slightly, it does. And, you know, sometimes it's fine. There are small changes, and sometimes there are pretty massive changes, like, you know, in Argo, they completely removed the influence of the Canadian government, which is pretty huge.
Yeah, really is. But, yeah, it looks interesting. You should totally give it a watch. Now, the next trailer we have is for a Netflix series. So far, it seems either a Netflix movie or a Netflix series. I wasn't entirely sure, but it's called Velvet Buzzsaw, and this is the first trailer. Its U.S. release date is February 1st, 2019. It's starring John Malkovich, Jake Gyllenhaal, Billy Magnuson, and others. And the synopsis is that after a series of paintings by an unknown artist are discovered, a supernatural force enacts revenge on those who have allowed their greed to get in the way of art. And it's directed by Dan Gilroy. Now, I'm really interested in this movie because it has a premise that I haven't really seen firsthand in a while. I remember back in the 90s, when movies that were made in the 90s and everything, they had a huge reputation of having supernatural forces affect the weirdest things. You know, cars, birds, things like that. But in this movie, the spirits are possessing paintings. As in, these paintings are actually coming to life somehow. The artist would use blood to do certain hues of red within these paintings and everything. And after he died, certain artists got their hands on various paintings in various parts of the art exhibit. And it seems that these paintings are killing people. Like, hands are reaching out of the paintings. It shows this one lady start to get sucked into like this metal ball that's at an art exhibit. And I'm interested in watching it only because of just how weird the premise is.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen the trailer, but I've seen a lot of images and stills from the trailer, and it looks trippy.
It really is. It really is. And I'm also interested in just seeing the character performances in general. Jake Gyllenhaal, he plays as this like art critic who's kind of lost his muse. He's looking at art pieces and everything, and he just can't really find inspiration in them anymore. Kind of like how you just kind of lose your fuse for certain things. And he just ends up coming across these paintings, and you see him kind of like panic and freak out because he has no idea what's going on and everything. But it looks good. So far, a lot of the movies we've seemed to be reviewing for Netflix seem to be really good movies.
Yeah.
They look like they have a lot of potential. So I gotta give Netflix kudos for their original content and whatnot.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm just looking forward to seeing more of these.
But you do it. Except unlike Annapurna, they seemingly have an endless amount of money.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But anyways, trailers that might drop anytime within next week, any updates on any of these movies that we're talking about. So that about does it for our trailer talk. And now, without further ado, it is time for us to get into our discussion pieces. Now, our first discussion piece is a bit of a interesting one. It's surrounding Randy Pitchford, the co-founder and CEO of Gearbox Entertainment, and the lawsuit that's being filed against him. Now, before we get into this topic, we'd like to note that there is a particular part of this lawsuit revolving a USB stick and the contents that are in it, but we are not going to be talking about that part of the lawsuit as the information is a bit too sensitive for our show.
Yeah, it's out there online, but it's unverified, and it's of a nature that we don't want to be spreading potentially false information that's damaging to such a drastic degree.
Yes, so we're going to talk about what is confirmed, and what is confirmed to be ruining this person's career. Now, Randy Pitchford, co-founder and CEO of Gearbox Entertainment, the company behind the Borderlands series, is being sued by former general counsel and vice president of legal affairs for the company, Wade Callender, for supposedly improperly siphoning $12 million for personal gain. In a 27-page complaint, which can be read on Kotaku's report of this story, Callender claims that in 2016, around the time that Gearbox was denying raises company-wide, Mr. Pitchford secretly arranged a private $12 million bonus, which he redirected from Gearbox's publisher and to his side business, Pitchford Entertainment Media Magic LLC. Now, this is a month after Gearbox and Mr. Pitchford had sued Mr. Callender for multiple improprieties, such as failing to pay off a home loan, breach of contract to pay off tuition, and the misuse of Gearbox's credit card to buy family vacations, gun club memberships, and firearm accessories while trying to obtain six-pack abs, unquote.
Yeah.
So, to put it short, both these guys screwed over Gearbox. These guys are trying to point fingers like, well, this person did this, and they're worse than me, and these guys are lying about me because I said these things about them, and they think I'm lying, but honestly, I don't care. Either one of you guys or both of you guys basically screwed over a Gearbox, especially around the time that Borderlands was being worked on.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Now, I'm going to confess, I don't like Randy Pitchford. I don't like him as a person. There have been multiple events in the past that just have completely soured me on him, so I can't help but be a little biased against him in this. And, take everything I say with a grain of salt if you want to. I don't exactly... I don't know, it's complicated. You see these two parties suing each other at about the same time, and you think, okay, maybe Callender is just counter-suing to get back at them, or maybe he, threatened to sue, so they sued him first, and now he's suing them back, And apparently Pitchford and Callender used to be friends until their relationship soured in the past few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, their friendship was proven to be evident from a tweet going back a few years. But what bugs me the most was that this $12 million private bonus was directed kind of against the success of Borderlands, right?
Yeah, it was a advance from Take-Two, which owns Gearbox. It was a $12 million advance bonus against potential Borderlands profits, which I am not versed in business, and that is a lot of jargon, but it basically makes me think they were giving him a bonus in regards to potential profits from the Borderlands franchise. They were essentially not giving him an advance in his pay, but an advance on a bonus to his pay because Borderlands might do well. But this was during a time when Gearbox was, denying raises, so it couldn't look like their CEO was getting a $12 million bonus, so he sort of hid it and secreted it away, which is pretty scummy.
It really is scummy, because of the fact that this money could have been used to help Borderlands. A lot of people, when they talk about the Borderlands series, people who don't like the Borderlands series, will often talk about things like the graphics. I mean, the game in itself is cel-shaded, and there's nothing wrong with cel-shaded graphics. In fact, some games pull them off really well, such as the Telltale games. But when it comes to various ports, the graphics aren't as good compared to the mainstream consoles. I used to own a PlayStation Vita, and one of the things that they advertised with the PlayStation Vita is that they would have a version of Borderlands 2, which would be available for the PlayStation Vita. But nobody really liked to get Borderlands 2 for the PlayStation Vita because of the fact that its graphics were so downgraded compared to the console version of Borderlands 2 that when you would jump into the game, it would take you a few seconds for the entire world and then the people in it and then yourself to render itself out to the graphics that are on the console. Like, it was bad. You could tell that work could have been put into it. And I can't help but feel like this money could have been put into Borderlands 1 to make the graphics look a little bit better, even though the graphics in the first one look a lot better than the second, in my opinion. But that some leftover money could have been put into perhaps Borderlands 2, or if anything, any of the other projects that Gearbox works on aside from Borderlands.
Aliens Colonial Marines.
For one, Aliens Colonial Marines. And there's just not much to be said about it. There's a lot of allegations that are being thrown around during this whole lawsuit thing. And it seems like they're trying to get people to choose a side over which person is the scummiest. Which person did the worst things. And I don't want to pick which person did the scummiest. They both did pretty scummy things, and they both screwed over Gearbox.
Yeah, the allegations against both of them are really bad, and it's early on enough that, honestly, neither of them sound like great people, so I don't want to side with either of them. And again, it's too early. These are all just allegations. There's no proof of any of this yet.
Mm-hmm.
And this will probably last months, probably years, these lawsuits. They're just of that magnitude.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I can't help but wonder how this is going to affect Gearbox in the future. Because I don't care about these two people. I care about the people who work for the company. The people whose job revolves around trying to get video games made and everything. Because it seems like somebody's trying to get money from somebody out of this whole thing. And I don't want any of the money to come from Gearbox. Because I don't want another Telltale Games to happen.
Yeah, I believe the lawsuit from Calendar is against Randy Pitchford specifically. I don't believe it's against Gearbox. I could be wrong. I could have misread it, but I do believe it is just against Pitchford. So it shouldn't really affect Gearbox other than Gearbox suing Calendar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. But that's really all we have to say about it. We just wanted to bring it up and kind of give our little opinion on it. So on to the next little topic. Now, as we've mentioned, Bungie and Activision has had a divorce.
Yep.
They've severed ties. And while Bungie, metaphorically, would be the mother taking the child, with them getting the rights to Destiny, Activision has basically become the dad whose life has spiraled downhill after this divorce. They are being investigated by shareholders, with requests from their shareholders, for securities fraud or unlawful business practices, due to the fact that their stock has apparently been plummeting very, very, very badly. And there are a few things that people say contributed to their stock dropping. Now, some people try and say that one of the things contributing to it was Destiny 2, how Activision tried to claim that it didn't perform as well as they would have hoped. Even though this is highly debatable, as Destiny 2 had a very warm reception when it came out in the games market. There are also other things affecting this as well. One thing could be the falling number of viewers who watch the Overwatch esports thing, the whole event that's going on, especially because of the whole Ellie incident, which happened last week, and that's also impacting the number of people who are watching streamers. There's a whole separation of Bungie and Activision, and that Bungie is taking the rights to Destiny, and a whole number of things contributing to this, and Activision is not doing well. They are not doing well. People are jumping ship, leaving Activision's staff and everything, because everybody's realizing Activision might actually be sinking to the ground. Even though this claim has been made multiple times in the past.
About a month ago, their CFO, they announced that they told the SEC that they were planning to fire him, but they essentially told him, okay, prove us that you can still work here. And he responded with saying, Netflix offered me more money, I'm leaving.
Yeah. And
then there's been the entire saga of Blizzard with Activision. It started around BlizzCon this year with the entire Diablo Immortal fiasco that, sent stock prices down. Then there's been the incidents of Activision trying to exert more control over Blizzard, which haven't been painted in a favorable light, which hasn't helped. Then there's the fact that Blizzard has lost several people, their CFO, one of their co-founders. That hasn't been great. There was the lackluster sales of Call of Duty Black Ops 4, which only made $800 million in 3 days, which I will point out was the same amount that Call of Duty World War II made last year, but it wasn't noticeable growth, so it was a failure because apparently money is infinite to them. They should be making an infinite amount of money always, but still have growth somehow. And a lot of this seems to be of Activision's own making. Their own ridiculous projections for Destiny weren't met, so they declared it a failure, and that sent their stock down. Their own ridiculous idea of how much Call of Duty would grow year over year wasn't met, so that sent their stock down. Their CFO left for reasons we don't really know right now. I haven't even heard any rumors about why he left. They said it was not because of financial impropriety, so that's not a thing. But this all seems to be a mess of Activision's own making. Mm-hmm. They have made their bed over years and years of ridiculous standards and the need to claw at more money. And now that they're not making an infinite amount of money, everyone's leaving.
Yeah. Now, if this were a different video game company, I might have a little bit more sympathy towards them. Like, if this was CD Projekt Red and all these things were happening, I'd probably feel a little bit bad about the whole thing. But bottom line is, this is Activision, a company that everybody knows for poor business practice. In fact, every so often it has to compete with EA for the title of worst video game company, it seems. Mm-hmm. And back in the day, they used to be able to bounce back from this with their original games, like Tony Hawk, or Guitar Hero, or the Skylander series. But the fact that Activision is so desperate for making profit, huge profit, they always want $1 million signs. They've driven a lot of their original property down to the ground, to where they can't rely on originals anymore for people to want to try their games. They tried so hard to basically become a business more than a video games company, and even that's starting to negatively impact the company's future and everything. So I can't feel bad about Activision, because Activision is Activision.
Yeah. Activision, EA, Ubisoft, all these companies, if they were to burn to the ground, I would only be concerned for the people in the building. I wouldn't care about the actual company.
Same here, because odds are, they'll probably just keep going on anyways. Now, we've talked about the dad whose life has spiraled downhill. Let's talk about the mom who has taken the child with her to live a brand new life, Bungie and her child, Destiny. I'll take it away to Bungie's #1 fan, Brian.
Well, I like Destiny. Bungie is another story. Okay, so we mentioned that Bungie has regained the publishing rights to the Destiny IP from Activision. This means that they have full control over the franchise and that they will be self-publishing it in the future. So this seems like good news. I mean, we've talked about how bad Activision is. Everyone knows how bad, they want microtransactions and everything. They just want endless profit to the detriment of the games, which is true to a pretty decent extent. Now, this deal has apparently been in the works for years now. There's been a lot of tension between Activision and Bungie behind the scenes, starting from before the first Destiny launched. And I'm going to give you a little short history. So, in 2010, Bungie signed a contract with Activision, a 10-year publishing contract that would span the entirety of the Destiny franchise. It was supposed to be composed of 4 core games starting in 2013, one releasing every year, and one releasing every other year, and in between those, a big expansion coming out with smaller DLCs littered in between these, big launches. This did not work out at all. Destiny, I'm just all over the place today. Destiny was delayed a year until 2014, when then Destiny 2 was delayed from 2016 to 2017. Bungie sort of abandoned the smaller DLC idea for Destiny 1 after the first year, and they seem to have done that again with Destiny 2 in a different format. And there has been a lot of tension because Activision had a contract with Bungie where they had to release certain projects at certain dates and make certain amounts of money with them, or there would be consequences. Funding would be reduced, or even in certain dire cases, it was rumored that if they didn't meet a certain deadline at a certain time, Bungie would actually become owned by Activision. Activision would get a 51% stake in the company, which would have been awful. However, now that Destiny is going to be self-published, a lot of people are saying it's Bungie's Freedom Day. This would be their second Freedom Day, by the way. They have a history of getting themselves into situations in which they need to escape from dramatically. And people are saying, oh, microtransactions will be gone. Oh, the game will be 10 times bigger. Oh, no more annual DLC. Oh, this, that, and the other thing. Which, maybe that'll be true. Maybe it won't, because the thing about publishing contracts is that they don't just exist for the publisher to make tons of money off them. The publisher has to provide something too. And what Activision provided as publisher was funding for Bungie to develop the game, a pretty significant chunk of funding, and the PR machine, essentially, behind Destiny. Every poster you saw for Destiny in a GameStop window, every ad you saw on TV, every this, that, and the other thing, those were paid for and produced by Activision. And that is actually a really huge cost. Because I don't know exactly the numbers for video games, but for movies, it's estimated that the big blockbuster movies like your Avengers have about $100 million marketing budgets, which, against sometimes $150 million actual production budgets, leads to these massive marketing campaigns with massive costs that Bungie is now going to have to organize, pay for, and produce on their own without, the backing of a major publisher that does this about 20 times a year. Also, people are saying that microtransactions will be gone. That's an entire possibility. The reason that microtransactions were put into Destiny was to meet profit quotas set by Activision. However, now that they're losing a significant sum of funding from Activision, it would make sense to actually keep them in and possibly increase them in order to cover the overhead that they are losing from this deal being broken up. So, a lot of people are saying that this is, the best thing that could happen to Destiny, and it absolutely could be. It could be a great thing for the franchise. But it could also be something really bad. Or not even bad, something neutral. This could change basically nothing. We could still have the same microtransactions, just the money going somewhere else. And the bottom line is we don't know what this means yet. What we do know is that Bungie's getting the publishing rights back. And that's all we know. That's all we know about what's going to happen. We know that Destiny 2 on PC at least is still going to stay on Blizzard's storefront. We know that Activision will continue to publish Destiny 2 content for at least the next few months. But that's about all we know. So I'm not advising optimism or pessimism, just caution.
Yeah, caution is definitely necessary whenever a game basically comes under new control, or at least the rights go back to a certain company, because Activision and Bungie, they both contributed a little bit to their stories, I suppose. A little bit.
Again, the current loot box system in Destiny 2, it was put in order to appease Activision's profit quotas, but the entire idea for how it was monetized and how it worked was completely under Bungie's control. This was their idea, which is why the loot boxes were really, really bad, and are still pretty bad, but, not as bad, so everyone just sort of takes it as a Pyrrhic victory at this point, I guess.
Yeah. But, all that can really be said is just kind of see how the aftermath would be. Because I'm not sure if Bungie, officially stated what they want to do now that they have full control, have they?
Yeah, they haven't said anything. They've said the current content roadmap they put out, which goes through, I believe, until next August of this year, will remain completely the same. Everything else will be releasing as planned. But we don't know. There have been rumors that there won't be another big expansion in September like they usually do, that they'll do another annual pass style thing with smaller content spread throughout the year. But maybe, we don't know if Destiny 3 is actually going to be a thing. It could be that now that they don't have to sequelize it thanks to Activision, they could, decide to just keep updating Destiny 2. However, that may still need to be published by Activision, so they may do Destiny 3, just have a title completely free of Activision. It's it's hard to know. There have been rumors that Destiny will go free to play. There will be rumors that it will, just be an annual expansion without, any of the DLC in between. We don't know what's going to happen. It is too early to tell. It's possible Bungie isn't even quite sure how they're going to work this yet. It may be years before we see the effects of this.
I definitely like the idea of Destiny being capable of being free to play.
Yeah, there have been rumors that it'll be a subscription service, which it kind of already is. I mean, you buy the annual pass once a year for $40. That's sort of a subscription, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I would be fine with Destiny going free to play if it still had the microtransactions in it, because that's really where a big point of contention is it's full of microtransactions on top of being, $40 or $60 a year, depending on, what type of content's coming out.
Yeah. And I also think that if Destiny decided to just constantly update one of their games instead of constantly producing sequels and whatnot, that would also be very, very good for them as well. And one game that I can think of where just constantly updating one thing instead of creating a sequel has been doing so well is Grand Theft Auto Online. Now, Grand Theft Auto Online was available for the 4th edition of GTA, but it's as soon as they created Grand Theft Auto Online for GTA 5, that Rockstar has been seeing a huge amount of success for that game.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the fact that instead of working mainly on a GTA 6, they've been focusing on constantly creating brand new content constantly for Grand Theft Auto 5, to where you can go in there now and do just about anything you want. They've even included things like flying cars. They're working on a Tron bike, I believe.
The Tron bike came out a while ago.
Oh yeah, the Tron bike has now actually come out and everything. So this really is a game where you could do anything you want. And the reason why is because they focus so much on just producing brand new content for that game in particular. Destiny 2, or whatever Destiny game they decide to constantly do expansions for, could really benefit from something like that, to where instead of having to create brand new story constantly, they can work on what story they already have, expand it as much as they want, go whatever direction they want to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there are a lot of directions they could take Disney that would make it better than it is now. There are also a lot of directions they could take it that could potentially make it worse than it is now. And I think, and I hope, that Bungie will be listening to feedback from players, because there has actually been a lot of feedback from the Destiny community about where they want the franchise to go for now. And, we don't know how it'll go. Maybe Bungie will be able to pull this off, self-publish Destiny, cover the costs, make a great game at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if potentially Destiny 3 is a smaller than we expect it to be, because there, maybe less funding for it. Who knows? But I'm cautiously hopeful.
Yeah. And I think at this point in time, that's all you really can be regarding this game.
Mm-hmm.
All you can do is just hope for the better.
Yep.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, that does it for today's episode. My name is Edward Heitman, and joining me in the studio, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Brian Rodriguez.
It really wasn't that long of an episode, but it feels like it was longer.
Yeah, time definitely flew by.
Yeah.
Now, be sure to tune in every Saturday from 1 to 2 to hear us talk about the latest in pop culture. Anything from movies to TV shows, video games, and comic books. You name it, we'll do our very best to cover it. Now, please stick around to enjoy some more content from the voice of Stockton, soon to be the voice of San Joaquin. And I also would like to mention, we're looking for volunteers at the moment to help out around here at the station. If you're interested in learning how to operate radio equipment like what's in front of me, or if you'd like to do something simple, just answering calls, emails, tidying up the place occasionally, whatever. 1 hour a week even would be a huge contribution to our station. Now, please stick around for some more great content and have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.